Well, welcome to day 16 of the 21 days of goals. After today, we only got 5 days left in this incredible journey. You are so close to the finish line. So keep showing up and keep moving forward. You are about to follow through all the way to the end. But today's video is going to be all about chapter 16, which is make a plan of action. This is all about taking our goals from a vision to a reality. And one thing I always tell leaders is the best laid plans in your mind are still that. They're in your mind. You can have the most incredible goals, but without a plan of action, they're just going to be inside of your dreams, inside of your head. But you've got to bring them out into the world, and that's why learning to create a plan is such a critical skill. Now, on page 194, Brian Tracy says that your ability to set goals and make plans to accomplish them is a master skill of success. Did you catch that? A master skill. That's why this chapter is so important. So let's look at really the big idea here, which is that planning in its simplest form is creating a list of every activity that needs to be completed to achieve the goals that you've set in front of you. But planning is a discipline, a skill, a habit, a competence that sets successful people apart from everybody else. So what I want us to talk about is how do we create a plan? And Brian Tracy outlines that starting on page 190. He puts 7 simple steps together. I'm going to walk you through them real quick. The first is start with a clear vision. Begin with the end in mind. You got to ask yourself, what is the ideal outcome? Because it's going to shape the plan that you're writing down. Number 2, prioritize your goals. You got to organize your goals by importance and then choose the most critical one to focus on first. What have we been saying? What you focus on grows, so determine where you'll put your initial focus. Number 3, set measures and standards. We got to decide how we're going to track our progress. We just did an entire chapter on that 2 chapters ago about measuring our progress. How do we know we're succeeding? How do we know we don't need to make adjustments? Or how do we know that everybody's moving in the right direction? It comes down to how we are measuring what we're doing. Number 4, identify obstacles. We got to pinpoint what's holding us back internally and externally. These are the roadblocks we talked about yesterday. Number 5, determine the knowledge and skills needed. So here it's important to ask ourselves, what do we need to learn and improve on to turn these goals into reality? We actually spent a section on this as well, because when you decide what you want to achieve and you look at where you're at, you're going to notice there's a gap. How do we close that gap? Number 6, organize by priority. Sequencing. We've talked about that too. The skill of knowing what you need to do, when you need to do it, and what you need to do next. And number 7, the final step is identifying the key stakeholders when you're making your plan. You got to determine who needs to be involved, who's going to help you with your goal. Sometimes we have goals that really are dependent on others' involvements because we're achieving it as a team. That's something that's got to be thought through when we make the plan. But when we incorporate these steps and we think through this process, it helps us to create that detailed plan that's going to ensure that every step we take leads in the direction of the result that we want. One way to think of creating a plan is like charting a course for a ship. Now, that's not something most of us do today, but a couple hundred years ago, this was the way of life. If you wanted to sail to a distant land, you wouldn't just hop on a boat and hope for the best. No, you'd plot your course on a map. You'd identify potential obstacles like storms or rough waters, and you'd plan the supplies that you would need for the journey. What do you need, and when are you going to need it? Without having a clear plan like this, you'd increase your chances of drifting aimlessly and even letting the slightest obstacle throw you completely off course. But with a detailed plan, well, now you're prepared to navigate the challenges and to stay on track to reach your destination. I want to give you a few of the key insights that I got from this chapter. And the first one is the importance of sequencing. Now, we've already touched on this a little bit, but Brian Tracy emphasizes the need to figure out the order of our actions. That's sequencing. We've got to ask ourselves 2 questions. What comes first? And then what comes next? And this is important in the planning process because if we don't do this, sometimes we can start something, we can get it 50% completed and realize that we needed to do something totally different first. So then we got to stop, start the next thing, take that all the way through, then come back, restart over here, and we realize that we can waste time. This is going to help us not do that and avoiding having to backtrack. Now, the second thing that I got was to be solution-oriented. Now, we talked yesterday about being solution-oriented, but this is really the how-to, the practical side of it, and it revolves around 6 questions that Brian Tracy gives us, and he gives it to us on page, 196. Yeah, 196. The 6 questions are at the top of the page. He says, ask yourself these 6 questions. Number 1, what is the problem? We got to identify what's standing in our way. Number 2, what else is the problem? Sometimes the first thing isn't the real thing or the only thing. So we've got to carry that out a little further. What else is the problem? Number 3, what are the solutions? Now you're starting to think, what are some ways that we can solve this? Number 4, what else is a solution? You got to continue that thought out a little bit. Get creative. It's going to help you get your brain going. Number 5, what can we do now? So how can we take action immediately now that we've identified the problem and thought of solutions? And number 6, what is the next step? So after what we do now, we got to figure out what we're going to do next. And that's how you sequence what you're doing while you're planning so that you can know where the appropriate action needs to be and when you need to take it. Now, number 3, always think on paper. It's right there on that same page, but it's so important to make a commitment to do this because writing out your plans is going to help you identify the obstacles. They're not just bouncing around up there in your head. It's going to help you refine the details, and it's going to help you to stay accountable because it is actually out of your head and onto the paper in front of you so that you can review it and others can review it to help you move in the right direction. So let's look at our reflection question, which is at the back of the chapter. It's going to be number 6. Continually seek out the fatal flaw, the one thing that could go wrong to throw off your entire plan. Here's why this is important. It's easy to wear the rose-colored glasses. I did that for so long. When we're setting goals, we only look at the positives. We only stare out in the future and think about what could be and how we're going to achieve it and how great that's going to be. But we got to get practical. I want you to take a moment to reflect. What's one thing that could derail your plan, and how could you address it to avoid problems later? Well, chapter 16 is a reminder that planning is essential when it comes to our goals. So I want you to write your plans down. I want you to sequence your actions, anticipate your obstacles, and create solutions to achieve what you've set out to do. As Brian Tracy says on page 199, I'll leave you with this. A great life, it's like a great ship. It should never be held by a single hope or a single rope. I want you to make plans. I want you to keep refining them, and I want you to take action every day. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about chapter 17. I'll see you then.